I'm someone that struggles to feel happy in the morning and also sometimes at night as well. And something else about me, I for years have been concerned that the Jewish community, more or less all of our communities and across communities, might tear ourselves apart with an inability to speak about Israel well. I find hope most mornings with a daily practice that we might each take on. I say as early as I remember, sometimes on waking, Moderni lefanecha melachai v'kayam shechazata bi nishmati bechemla rabba munatecha, meaning thankful I am before you, sovereign, living and persistent, that you return to me right now, my breath, my soul, in gracious generosity. How great is your faith in us? How great is your faith in me? And as I say it, struggling in the mornings, I bring to mind people and things, specific things and people that I'm grateful for. And I begin to feel gratitude. I begin to feel better. I repeat the words and reflections to myself, sometimes concertedly in those initial moments, sometimes spread out over the morning. Saying the words, I feel different. And this is why the practice also reassures me about the power of words, that we can speak well on even the most complex personal issues. Because thoughtful words are powerful. I get the feeling with Modeh that I have often after an open, important conversation with a loved one or with a colleague or with a therapist, that moment of feeling better and seeing possibilities that you had given up on just through the power of words. Judaism and this week's double portion, Achrei Mot Kedoshim, inspires us with the power of words and instructs us with specific speech acts. And I really just want to learn to and hope that you're moved by the nuance to apply them at this difficult time as you will. Verse 16 of chapter 19, Lo telech rachil ba'amecha, Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa. Do not go about as a talebearer among your people. Do not stand upon the blood of your neighbor. So what is the relationship between the two parts of that verse? Not going around telling tales and not standing upon the blood of others. Ibn Ezra in the 12th century says, we know how slander can endanger people. And so we must act in the face of slander. He's teaching us racism, anti-Semitism, lies, the perpetuation of tale-bearing, we know can create a climate that leads to blood. So we each avoid racist generalizations and counter committedly and honestly lies and misperceptions. This is our verbal responsibility. Malbim, in the second half of the 19th century, in what we would now call Ukraine, says that not standing upon blood comes after the commandment to not be a talebearer as a sort of countermeasure, to teach that when there's blood at risk, when there's life at stake, in those situations, it's your responsibility to speak out, rather than holding back from speaking out. For he reminds us in Judaism, it's an obligation to do anything to save a life. So that one commandment can teach us two things. Speak out to save lives, and don't speak in a way that denigrates the value of people's lives. One other verbal commandment that comes straight afterwards in verse 17. Don't hate your fellow in your hearts. You shall surely rebuke your people. Don't incur guilt because of them. You shall surely rebuke your people. This is one commandment that many of us understandably avoid. I think there's an argument for this being one of the very hardest, to rebuke our people, our loved ones, our community, and not incur guilt because of them. But again, the consideration of adjoining statements can inspire us to do most sensitively what we're being commanded to do. You must surely rebuke. You shouldn't incur guilt on him or because of him. One option of the relationship between these words is you should not incur guilt yourself by staying quiet, because the beginning of the verse told us that to hate your fellow is a sin as well. So if you don't get it out, you let it fester and you yourself become culpable for a sin. Or another option, you should rebuke your fellow, but you should not incur guilt by doing it unkindly and therefore sinning, by doing it in a way that brings shame. And we're taught elsewhere in our Judaism that bringing shame, whitening someone's face, is akin to bloodshed. So what a beautifully hard call to action, that we should each commit to giving words to others that help them get better. And we need to give them in a way that lets the person see their value, their capability, our love for them, their ability to grow and improve. And there's at least a third option as well. You shall not incur guilt by letting destructive behavior go unchallenged, and therefore letting another continue to diminish themselves. And invariably within a collective, that behavior diminishes you as well. Rabbi Rachel Adler and Noam Sion, in the wonderful article on this commandment, point out that this notion that we can incur guilt because of our fellow's behavior is a facet of the Talmudic principle, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh. Each of us, in the collective of our people, rise and fall together. We are each a guarantor for the other. We are therefore responsible for each other's thriving and for each other's behavior. We're to care enough about other people to be committed to their fulfilling their potential within our collective and their acting right. And we're to use the power of words to practically validate and rebuke someone. And maybe it might be easiest in this very difficult commandment to sometimes just tell that other person what you're really looking for, to make a request. Now, from this difficult commitment to rebuke, we can see that in our Judaism, the strength and unity of the Jewish community must emerge in our ability to disagree well while being thoroughly, lovingly committed to each other. If you thought our people's unity would come from uniformity, please give up on that. I believe, by the way, that this community, this particular community, can actually lead in disagreeing well, while fostering beautiful closeness. This would be a contribution to the Jewish world and to this world of terribly dispiriting discourse outside these walls. We can each use words tremendously powerfully to call out and to help grow and to express appreciation. This whole double Torah portion actually subtly begins with a grand, powerful teaching about the power of language before giving us these two prescriptions that I mentioned. Now, when I say modeh in the morning, I partly have in mind the power of divine language at the beginning of the Torah. Vayomer Elohim, the ultimate spoke and brings things into being, worlds, realities, creation. When I say modeh, the notion of the necessity of speech and the power of language is partly Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, as we sung this morning. Blessed is the one that spoke and became, bringing into being. Baruch Omer v'aseh, blessed is the one that does and speaks and knows that speaking is an act. But halfway through the Torah portion, at the beginning of ours, we get a very different sense, a complementary sense of the power and necessity of language. For this Torah portion begins not Vayomer Elohim, but Vaydaber Adonai achrei mot shnei bnei. The compassionate one spoke after the death of two children. And now we see the necessity for sensitive, beautiful language and speaking in a world in which death is all too present. Now we see that language and speaking must powerfully persist in a world of death, injustice, and pain. Because speaking could have retreated as well, uncertain of what can be said, and how do you say the right thing in the face of such eviscerating reality. But death and difficulty demand words, sensitive ones, in the perennial afterwards as well. Words to relate, to comfort, to come closer. Words to continue. Do not stand on the blood of a fellow human being. Speak up if it could contribute to a life being saved. Be careful of generalizations and confront and challenge lies, for both of these can contribute to bloodshed. Speak in order to lovingly, gently, effectively help your loved ones, your family, in this community and outside of this community. And then in our extended Jewish people, let us help each other get better. Let us disagree better. Be inspired by the power of words to reshape your feelings, to reorient your life, to save lives and to help people flourish, and to maintain comfort in a face of death. In this moment, and since October the 7th, since that morning, we're so painfully aware of so many deaths and the danger of so many more. And we're also more than ever struggling to talk about these things, to find the sensitive and powerful language with each other, to reflect rather than obfuscate, to talk and connect, and at least find the comfort of love and community, rather than to dismiss and to distance. We need to embrace the sophisticated verbal directives of Torah more than ever. And I have seen hope here that we can hear each other. We had that town hall months ago with such a cross-section of thoughts and feelings. And I know some of you found it uncomfortable because we're still learning to talk and listen as kindly as we might. But on the whole, we did all sit together and share thoughts and feelings. And we could do this more, perhaps in some better ways, less town hall, but real interpersonal talking. And also, just very practically, we might each say moda'ani or moda'ani in the morning to remember how lucky we are to live and how lucky we are to have this tremendous world-shaping responsibility of language. Shabbat shalom.